haven't had many parents, good, healthy parenting role models in their community to emulate. So children learn that they cannot trust adults, they cannot trust their parents, and because they have so much exposure to violence and trauma, it repeatedly shatters their ability to trust. And when you can't trust, you can't easily connect with human beings, which reduces your capacity for empathy, which makes it much easier to kill or harm someone else. And of course, we can't have a discussion about guns, gangs, whatever, without talking about drugs. In the context in which I work, drugs are easily available. It's a good option if you actually can't cope with these overwhelming negative emotions. But it escalates your impulsivity and your ability to control your own emotions. Secondly, in violent environments, people feel powerless. And I think that's another big important discussion that we don't address enough of in this country, is power and oppression across the board. Violence is modeled as a solution to achieving power and control in an environment where people feel disempowered and where trauma repeatedly takes away your control. And children who are growing up in families where they witness violence, they kind of internalize this violence and use it in a way to resolve everyday forms of conflict. The other thing is that we daily see, which is really sad, we see authority figures, other than parents, reinforce trauma in the way that they disrespect and disempower and humiliate and dehumanize young people in the community, especially in poor communities. And I've seen it multiple times where it's actually ended up pushing that young person into the direction of becoming a perpetrator. A teacher who bullies a young grade R, tells him your father's in prison, you're going to end up just like your father. A policeman who I witnessed pulling down a young innocent boy's pants in a search, but in front of the whole community and in front of his peers. Now, in a background of injustice in this country and all forms of racial prejudice and other forms of prejudice, that creates a toxic combination for legitimizing aggression and violence. Now, given the context that a lot of these children are living in, I want you just to imagine a 10-year-old boy who's growing up in this kind of environment. You are aware of the socioeconomic issues. He's feeling dehumanized, he's disconnected from himself. And his first offense is that he involves in stabbing another little girl in his class with a pen because she gave him a look that his brain interpreted as being threatening. Now that kind of case comes across my desk at least 3 times a year, if not a younger age. But it's those innocuous situations which this kind of terror-incubated brain misinterprets, and it escalates into arguments and misunderstandings and ultimately these fatal cycles of revenge. But our society has created ways for this little boy to enact that aggression through making it easy for him to join a gang and be recruited into a gang, and makes it easy for him to get his hands on a gun. And by the time he's 14, he may have killed a few people. By the time he's 18, he's going to be in Baltimore for murder. But having a gun gives this boy access to the things that he needs. He needs the power, he needs the safety, he needs control, he needs a brotherhood, he needs the family, and he needs the means to generate income. And this is what it provides in that context. And like many children, this boy has learned that violence is morally acceptable when you're feeling disrespected and threatened. But it's these kinds of messages that he's learned that are learned in the family. And they are reinforced through the culture of the community, and they're still being ignored by our society. And because putting the trigger of a gun is so efficient, it's so quick, it doesn't require much social investment, that's what makes it dangerous in that context. Sadly, I also have to say that this kind of response is quite normal. And having worked in the mental health field, I've come to see that violence is never senseless. If you look at the psychological state of families and communities, it makes sense. And we've termed it the impact of this kind of trauma as negative resilience, because it's a way of surviving a dangerous environment. It's not an illness, it's not a disease, it's survival. Which doesn't mean that we condone the act, but we've got to start reframing how we understand these concepts. We've also had a number of conversations with some of the youth about guns in the last month, just to get their input on what they think are the solutions to some of the problems that they're experiencing, because they are exposed to illicit guns daily. And I wanted to put up 1 or 2 quotes. I had many, but a big thing for them that they raise is that we need to end corruption, obviously, locally, at local and international spaces. But especially the process that, as has also been mentioned, that facilitates illegal repossessed guns being put back into circulation. There's lots of anecdotal quotes that we have about guns that have been repossessed and they're found back in the community. So that is a serious problem. And without trust in the police system, it doesn't matter how strict our gun laws are, they're not going to affect the issues of crime and violence that we're experiencing on the community level. Because we can have strict gun laws, but if the police don't have the infrastructure and the support and the resources to implement and follow through on the law, it's going to continue to break the trust in the system, no matter how well-intentioned it is. But beyond removing illegal guns, the most important thing is that we need to find ways to disarm the minds of the people who are living with aggression. Otherwise, the aggression is going to remain, and they will find other ways to act out that aggression. And you can remove all the guns, but ultimately they're going to find ways to enact that aggression through making zip guns, which we see a lot of in the community. They will use knives, they will use fists, bricks, sexual violence, but it's not dealing with the unresolved trauma that we're sitting with. And a good example, which another mental health expert in Glasgow said, was Glasgow is the knifing capital of Europe. But he said that if we had the rates of gun availability as the US, we would be the most violent nation in the world, because guns are so instant if they're not regulated properly. But we need to also start looking at not just mortality and death statistics. We have to look at the assault statistics, because that's actually the real data. So, and I think we need to start looking at real solutions to a much broader set of problems, of which gun violence is one of them. The only way to stop it being taken and to take it more seriously is to make mental health a priority in this country. Too often we don't want to address trauma because it's ugly and it's complicated and it's messy. But we're going to have to. And I think civil society has taken the brunt of this work on themselves with very few resources. And I think they get what I'm saying, but I don't think there are actually many of them here, which is also a bit sad. It is also not one sector or one department's responsibility to provide solutions. I mean, if you look at education, if you look at health, social development, poverty, all these different departments, where are we not affected by trauma, personally and professionally? The effects of trauma are pervasive, and they're